Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon when you are watching this webinar. My name is Dave Nagel. I'm very excited to have a chance this summer on June the 6th and then throughout several times throughout the 2016-17 school year to work with the leadership team at Lake Zurich High School. I had the privilege of meeting some of you around the end of March, and really excited to have a chance to come together and help you as a leadership team drive impact into your collaborative work. And one of the things as teachers at any level, at any high school, where I've spent most of my career in high school, similar to Lake Zurich, that I think are doing very well and have some very high achieving students. The challenge is to push them to the next level, as opposed to other times where the challenge is different. And some high schools I've worked in where we had a lot of students that were emergent learners, still that collaboration time was critical. And teachers of anything at all levels are time poor. And so to have the time to come together and learn from our peers and make the most of it is critical. And I'm hoping to help you build that plan in place that's really going to impact your student learners at Lake Zurich High School. A little bit about me. My background has been specifically in secondary education. There's actually a typo on this screen, though. I was actually an administrator for 5 years at one of the largest high schools in Indiana. And I'm only sharing that with you because I understand the comprehensive nature of large high schools and the challenges they face and the desires that we all have for students to excel in our own disciplines and our own subject areas, how we can come together and make sure we're developing the best learners possible. Doing this work as a presenter and consultant for about 12 years, and my first publication came out about a year ago. I'm extremely proud of it, and it's focusing on as much formative assessment and quality actions we need to take that will eventually lead into a grade, but specifically with a secondary teacher approach. And one of the things, as I've mentioned before several times, at the end of the day, we have to realize as high school and middle school teachers, things aren't that different around what we do in terms of teaching and learning. But in some ways they are because of the logistical makeup of our school. So it's a little bit about me, and I wanted to also provide an opportunity throughout this webinar series when we come together June 6th and throughout next year. You don't have to go through Terry or Jody or anybody else or any of your administrators. You can come straight through me if you have a question, a thought, or a challenge on anything at all as we engage in this work. So I'm going to jump right in. And again, this is going to be just a little bit of an overview. This will be one of 2 webinars I'm going to put together for you prior to June 6th. And just a few reflective questions at the end. But John Hattie will always challenge us to know thy impact, to consistently monitor the impact we are having on the students we serve. And so I'm going to ask us then with that thought to take a moment and pause the recording and fill in on your reflection sheet. Is your current PLC, the grade level team or structure you come together, having the greatest possible impact? Take just a moment, pause the recording, jot down some ideas. If you're in a small group, this is a perfect time to come together and reflect together around that question. Welcome back. As always, I will plan throughout these webinars and this series to assume that you've paused the recording longer than I have. It allows me to jump right back in, but I'm assuming you need to pause longer. I'm just going to take the opportunity to move on, and you can pause the recording as much as needed. In terms of research and evidence around PLCs, and again, Rick DeFore did more to put PLCs on the map and to make it part of our vernacular than anyone. And certainly with him being in your backyard, we're familiar with him. But Rick didn't invent PLCs. And there's not a lot of deep empirical research around professional learning communities because to be at that level, we have to take the individuals out who were involved in the study. And Vesio and her colleagues at Florida State combed the literature and found about 13 what they were able to vet with their process research studies around PLCs, and included 11 of them in a pretty large scale study. And they found when these 4 things are in place, positive relationships, goal setting, a collaborative culture, and shared values, it led to about as much as over a third of a change in practice and as much as an 85% variance in achievement. So my challenge to any of us that are in PLCs is, don't we have some of these at times and not see those kind of results? And if that's the case, we have to ask why. Why might we have relationships and even set goals and those other things and not be getting the kind of impact we would expect? And I've listed here 5 reasons for a lack of PLC impact. First one is it could be a place where we focus more on teaching and not learning. At the secondary level, we have to realize one thing, that our elementary colleagues are a little bit better than we are. And they are better at diagnosing. Sometimes at the secondary level, we like to prescribe. We like to prescribe medicine for the patient before they come in, and whether that patient is ill or very healthy, we may have predetermined the path for how they're going to reach the next set of goals without thinking about where they're at. It could be a great place to avoid change and to maintain some status quo. Also, it can become a common term for any conversation. Truly, to be a professional learning community, we have to be learning on a consistent basis. We, the adults, have to be learning about our craft, coming together, talking about strategies, not coming together to talk about what the next activity for our students will be doing. When I talk about false assumptions, this is where I challenge the school leaders. And I've listed these 4 here, and you see them on your handout. Just because teachers are being friendly and getting along doesn't mean there's a change. And I want to challenge us at Lake Zurich High School. I'm just guessing your football coaches or maybe your band directors, when they come together, their conversations aren't always harmonious. They're businesslike, but they could be intense, and they could be, challenging. Just because we've changed culture doesn't mean we've changed what we do. And then increasing the amount of collaboration, just having more of it, isn't necessarily going to impact student or teacher learning. And so we want to be very intentional with how we look at the learning element of our adults first. And I'm going to take us around this idea of efficacy and empowerment and creating that proper peer pressure amongst the adults within a team. So we're all accountable, not just to the students, but to each other. The most important thing that will impact the success of any of the teachers listening to this webinar right now going into next school year is the teachers that have your students right now, how well they're assessing, the level of rigor and detail they're putting into their work. And so actually it's drifting between number 1 and 2. John Hattie's constantly monitoring and collecting information, but one of the highest levels of impact that he has seen is collective teacher efficacy. And there's 3 things that really drive that. And that's number 1. I'm going to walk us through these 3 points: applying knowledge, positive interdependence, and what Horn and Little called fine-grained discourse around student learning. And what can unite that is a common challenge. First thing is that teachers have to apply new knowledge. And I mentioned on a webinar for the large-scale leadership team in the district that we can't monitor professional learning initiatives based on the exit tickets at the end of the session. We have to make sure that teachers have a chance to learn and go deep and then apply it into their classroom. And as busy as we are, if we only passively learn something and it doesn't become a strategy that we're going to embrace or have a chance to get good at, we're not going to put it in our classrooms. We're too busy. So PLCs are a great place where we can learn and practice the strategies, not just talk about what the kids are going to do. We need to talk about what we're going to do and developing that mastery. When we get really, really good at something, we get good at a new golf stroke or a new club, we'll use it more. We're not going to use it if we're not comfortable with it. A new tool in the garden, a new tool in the kitchen. Think about it. When we get really good at something, then it becomes part of our vernacular, it becomes part of our repertoire. Until we get good at it, it's a lot easier just to leave it off to the side. And then Hadar and Brody, I love their research around PLCs. I love what they mention here. They say when we just are passive in our learning, we go into that moratorium on innovation. And one of Hattie's mind frames, being a change agent, is that we innovate. Well, it's going to be kind of hard to innovate and become a change agent if I'm in the zone where I'm already consolidating what I've learned and I'm just passively paying attention. So we have to be engaged when we're doing any type of learning, whether we're 15 or 50. The next I want to talk about is how we create, and we're just going to be a big focus of our work on June the 6th, positive interdependence. And that's not just to sing Kumbaya, but that we're accountable to each other. One of the things I think that happens in any setting in our profession is we realize that we don't have to do it all. If Terry and Jody and another teachers on the team with me, we can very easily have a set of tasks and structures that we're going to get in place over the course of a few weeks that we're not all going to do equally. Terry's going to bring strategies for the students that are struggling. I'm going to come up with that new lab for the students that are above grade level. And we're going to commit to putting them in the Google Doc 3 days before we meet as a PLC and commit to reading about them so the time we come together is as purposeful and focused as possible. So we're not wasting each other's precious time by not following through on the tasks that we agreed to. Because far too often, and you can tell already I use a lot of sports metaphors, PLCs exist as a track team. We collect our points, we throw them in the pot, because no matter how hard that kid's trying to throw that shot put, there's nothing that hurdler can do to help him. A basketball team, it's kind of hard to score if my teammates aren't passing me the ball or playing defense. We have to eliminate being a track team PLC and become more of a basketball or football or soccer team where we're equally focusing on the ball or the goal and our actions really impact each other. As I mentioned, same quote, different slide, that proper peer pressure. I go back to that because that eliminates the isolation. And even in a high school where I had a chance to meet teachers, and it's obvious there's strong camaraderie and friendship and all the important things we need to have in a culture where it's fun to work. It was fun to be at Lake Zurich High School. It was fun to see the students sit in the cafeteria and be unsupervised and not have to be monitored, and some of the dialogue with the teachers. You guys like each other. That's a good thing. But we want to make sure that we have the right amount of accountability, because even in that environment, when we really like each other, we can go back to our classroom and it can be a pretty lonely environment, even though in the hallway it's friendly. So how we build that across and sort of break down those walls metaphorically. Then that other piece is having fine-grained discourse around student learning. That we're consistently looking at the learning the students are doing, not the doing. And when they are getting things right or wrong, what does that tell us? If a student, we have a classroom assessment and we get 80% of our students getting an item right, that tells us one of two things. Either tells us we taught it really, really well, or it's too doggone easy. And if 80% of them get it wrong, it doesn't mean it was a bad item. Maybe currently it was too hard or we didn't teach it very well. So we're looking at the learning that took place. We're focusing there about what might be their next step. And so what I like to call impact PLCs or impact PLTs, learning teams, they really have these 5 elements. And you can see this in your working handout. But they embrace common challenges. They have deep levels of relational trust. I've already talked a little bit about the efficacy piece. They put authentic instructional protocols in place, and they focus on the adult learning. The only way we can be a professional learning community is if we, the adults, are learning, not the kids. We first. And the more we learn and change our actions, the better they're going to learn and perform. And so, again, these are broad brushstroke highlights, but I'm going to talk about how we develop common challenges. We want all of our students, or most of our students, to fill in the blank, to really understand how to go deeper with the Pythagorean theorem and come up with their new math problem, how they're understanding some pieces about stoichiometry early in the unit. Because once they do, they can go so much deeper into some of the labs we want to do. So we're really going to focus some strategies early on, because even though most of our kids will get it, we're going to have some that are going to struggle. And I've only shared just 2 examples, but this is what really strong teams do. They have a common challenge that unites their efforts and their passions, so that way they're focusing on making sure we all get there. And it's not just about my kids getting there. I'm as accountable for your students as well. And I also love this one as we build efficacy in the mind frames. That when we develop that common challenge, when we have that positive interdependence, it's not about the amount of time we sit together. Sometimes being together more is going to cause more isolation. We need to get away from each other. And other times we need to come together more often. Or we need to be more intentional with what we do prior to the meeting. So the idea that every PLC needs to meet at a certain amount of time to be effective, that'd be the equivalent of saying every student who sits in my class for a certain amount of time will be proficient or above. We need to look at this for the adults as much as we do the students around what is the right amount of learning time and then how well we use it. So the last piece I want to talk to about is how teams can become dysfunctional. This comes from Lencioni's work, and the dysfunctions of a team. I had a teacher recently that said, on my team, I don't know if we avoid conflict because we don't have trust, or we don't have trust, so we avoid conflict. But do we challenge each other at the right level? And when we talk about relational trust isn't something that just we talk about. It's when we take risks and we grow and we do the work together. Joyce and Shower's work is so profound about what real trust is. And Brick and Schneider found in the Chicago public school turnaround at the early part of the 2000s, the only commonality of the schools that developed and grew or having success were the ones that had deep levels of relational trust within their PLCs. So the last thing I want to talk about, and again, I know this is sort of a whirlwind, kind of a very strong approach, a little bit of a machine gun on some of these ideas, but at least it kind of sets the stage, and your working handout helps you kind of process some of these. But I like to equate around protocols within a PLC, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If we don't have food, shelter, or safety, we're going to die. But just because we have them doesn't mean we're going to thrive. If we don't have the basic professionalism, if we're not on time, we're not respectful, we're not prepared, we should shut that meeting down. And respectful doesn't mean we're just going to be professionally or politely respectful. Respectful means I'm going to challenge you when your idea isn't as strong, and you should challenge me. We have behaviors that will contribute to engagement. One that I guarantee doesn't is when we're looking at our cell phone when our peers are talking. But then when we get into those basic instructional norms, we have a protocol we follow, those probing norms for, do students really get it, or what are they missing, or might we need to challenge them to the next level, because we're only getting feedback from our upper level kids when we ask questions. That skilled instructional dialogue, if we think about that highest level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that's team self-actualization, very few teams live there. We want to make sure we visit there. I want to share with you a district that I work at in Iowa, Carlisle Community Schools, that has kind of embraced this on a deep level. And I will tell you, and I don't think this is too much of a challenge at Lakes, or maybe it is for a team or two, they attacked the bottom one, that basic professionalism. That was where the teachers and the leaders were going to stop the meeting and address behavior that is just simply not expected. We got to be on time. We're going to bring the necessary materials. We're going to not have the side conversations. We're going to go through our agenda early so we know what our focus is. But then what they've said was after that, now that they've kind of established that, every team should be at that minimum level basic instructional dialogue every meeting. And if they're not, they need to ask questions as to why. Why didn't we get there today? We came in a little bit unprepared, didn't quite have our agenda. We kind of got off track. That's fine. There's at least an awareness for why they didn't get there. But also, and I will be happy to send the supplementary document that comes with this, but they stop at the end of each meeting and pause and monitor where were they and how did they get to that level and what's their plan for the next meeting. Again, it's a simple example and a schematic that addresses the whole idea of a hierarchy of collaboration. But I want us to think about how we as a team realize the more we put concepts and ideas in place in our meetings and talk about them at a deep level, the more ideas I'm going to walk away with. And maybe the ideas that are going to impact one or all of my students at a deeper level. And if anything at Lake Zurich, that deep level probing instructional dialogue to ensure that there's the right amount of rigor that's in place, the right amount of challenge for our students, because your students, a lot of them are ready to be challenged, maybe at a deeper level at times. Doesn't mean you're not going to have some that are struggling as well. This type of hierarchy might help us embrace more of capturing all the needs for those students. I appreciate so much your time on this webinar. And again, I hope some of the reflection questions in the extra document helped you follow along. Please send any questions or ideas that you have. We're going to have one more of these prior to our time on June the 6th. But you don't have to go through anybody else. You can come right to me. And if you have a thought or a question or a challenge about anything that I've mentioned, please feel free to shoot me an email. Again, I'm so excited and humbled to work with you. Look forward to that so much. Hope you have a great finish to the year. Look forward to the next webinar that you'll have coming in the next week or so. And we'll see everybody on June 6th. Thanks and have a great day.